Frontline is made possible by the annual financial support of PBS viewers like you. Thank you.
For almost 2 decades, Iran was the face of Islamic terror in the United States. But within Iran, there has been enormous change.
We have a very sophisticated political system now in Iran, well established.
People get elected who seemingly want openings.
The true face of Iran still remains elusive.
The mullahs will thwart the efforts of the good Iranian reformers because they need an enemy. And their favored and chosen enemy is us.
Now President Bush has placed Iran alongside Iraq and North Korea in the axis of evil.
Iran aggressively pursues weapons and exports terror,
turning up the pressure on an already weakening Iranian reform movement. And leaving the U.S. and Iran back where they started.
The American intervention is not in favor of the freedom lovers.
I like to call Iran the Bermuda Triangle of American foreign policy.
Tonight, Frontline investigates how the war on terror led to Tehran and where both nations go from here.
Tehran, capital of the Islamic Republic of Iran. A country locked in a Cold War with the United States and a growing number of its own people. Once a week, Mahin Pourzan visits the apartment where her brother Siamak lived until 6 months ago. On a Saturday night in late November, he told her strange men had been trailing him for 2 days. That night, he disappeared. In the 23-year history of the Islamic Republic, Pourzan's story is not unusual. 2 years before he went missing, his eldest daughter, Lily, a law student, fled the country and now lives in Canada, a world away from her aging father.
He's 71 years old and he is not in a good physical and emotional health. I know that. And he was taking medication for a long time now, for maybe 10 years now. And I don't know really what will happen to him.
His wife, Marangas Kar, is a prominent lawyer and political activist in Iran. 2 years ago, she was arrested and jailed without charges over public comments that were considered to be critical of the Islamic regime. Eventually released on bail, she was in the United States undergoing treatment for cancer when her husband disappeared.
They arrested many writers and many intellectuals. Even they arrested many religious activists who thinks different, and I cannot say as a lawyer that my husband is arrested. I can say that my husband is disappeared, and maybe according very bad torture, they could get anything they needed that against himself, against me, against reformist people.
Tehran, a chaotic city of more than 12 million people. Siamak Pourzan could be in any one of scores of police stations and jails in this ancient, sprawling place. He worked here in Iran's first privately operated cultural center. Today, his office is empty because he ran afoul of a Byzantine legal system where basic human rights are defined by rigid religious rules. The birth of modern Iran in February 1979 had almost biblical overtones. the triumphant return of a messianic religious leader who had become a powerful political figure, the Ayatollah Khomeini, a stern conservative on whom the people pinned high hopes for freedom. After decades of dictatorship, they were ready for democracy. Khomeini didn't believe in democracy. Instead, he offered them an Islamic republic. Nobody knew for sure what he meant, but any change in the status quo seemed like an improvement. "23 years later, the improvements are hard to find. Iran has become a political paradox. A young, sophisticated society, curious about the outside world and hungry for the advantages of modernity, caught in a struggle the West resolved centuries ago. A clash between democracy and religious authority. This was once the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. A dramatic showdown here stamped the new Iran with a radical religious character and set a course of confrontation with the country that had once been its closest ally. November 4th, 1979, militant Islamic students invaded the embassy and took its 63 employees hostage. The hostage-taking held the world's attention, but it also caused a deep political split within Iran. The public was behind the students, but moderate politicians thought they went too far. Conservative clerics seized the opportunity to sideline the secular moderates. The hostage crisis lasted 444 days. One of the first American reporters to cover it was Elaine Sciolino. Writing for Newsweek and later the New York Times, she's followed the unfolding struggle ever since.
You have a battle raging, not for control over territory, but for the soul of a nation. And it's between these two impulses, belief and democracy. And belief doesn't allow for democracy.
In Iran, Sciolino found a complex nation with a 2,500-year history as a regional superpower called Persia, a history she described in her book, Persian Mirrors.
Iranians think of themselves as the center of the universe. And when they talk about projecting power, they want to be the regional power in the Persian Gulf. So when they see a country like the United States projecting power and, in their view, putting them down or repressing them, they react viscerally.
Before the hostages went free, radical clerics would seize undisputed control of the country. In those crucial days, one student emerged as the voice of the radicals. Her name, Masumeh Ebtekar.
I've been a student in Iran.
Today, she's one of Iran's vice presidents. She typifies the Iranian political paradox, democracy struggling for space inside a theocracy.
Could you single out the one great achievement that you believe remains from 1979?
You're beginning the interview, I presume,
Yes.
right? Okay. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. I think the greatest achievement is the independence of a nation, and also to create a new experience on the basis of a religious democracy.
Religious democracy, an ideal that in Iran translates into a repressive political reality. Iranians get to pick their governments in open elections, but public policy must conform to strict religious principles. Rules of law and personal behavior defined by powerful clerics, like the current supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, successor to the Ayatollah Khomeini, autocrats with little tolerance for dissent.
Too often we hear stories about the use of repression, the use of censorship, newspapers being closed down, intellectuals put in jail.
Well, many newspapers were closed down. Many other newspapers now have springed up, and they're working, and they're speaking out, and they're talking about these issues and debates. And many of these issues are being tolerated now, and there's a genuine change in the approach. We have a very sophisticated political system now in Iran, well established and very well supported by the people. We've had elections practically every year.
But the clerics also control the elections. Political candidates need the approval of a powerful committee of clerics and Islamic legal experts called the Guardian Council. Economist Farabouz Reizdana was part of a reform group whose members tried to run in parliamentary elections 2 years ago.
We had a coalition called a National Religious Coalition. Many leaders are in jail now. But Guardian Council, they rejected me and all of them. Just one was accepted because that time Guardian Council didn't know enough about that gentleman because he was very young and very clever, and he was elected. And after election, they said that you are not accepted after election. And he spent some time in jail as well.
By Western standards, Reizdana would be considered uncontroversial, but he too has spent time in jail just for questioning the legitimacy of a political process that is dominated by a powerful elite made up of conservative clerics.
The problem arises because some minority that believes that they are real representative of God and the Islam are in power. And they do not accept the competition, the innovation of the people, the participation of people, democracy, social justice, and civil society. They do not accept it.
How dangerous is it for people like you to speak like this in Iran today? There's obviously a high risk.
It is a little bit dangerous, not little bit, more than little bit dangerous, because you are walking on a sword. But anyway, some people have accepted the responsibility and they are ready to accept the danger and the risk.
In spite of the apparent risks, he continues to agitate for reforms. His most recent arrest was 2 years ago after a conference on Iran's reform movement held in Berlin. One prominent reformer there was the lawyer, Morangas Carr, whose husband, Siamak Khorzand, has been missing since last November. On her return from Berlin, she was jailed for 2 months. She and her youngest daughter, Azadeh, now live in exile in Washington, D.C.
Even before Berlin conference, I've been in danger, like many intellectual and secular activists in Iran. During that time, even some list published, and on that list, I think about 200 names that they said these activists must be killed.
And were you on the list?
Yes, in every list.
Dariush and Parvena Forahar also ended up on the hit list. They too were outspoken critics of the Islamic Republic. They openly called for a secular democracy. They were early supporters of the Khomeini revolution in 1979. He was a member of a transitional government, one of the moderate secular politicians who resigned when they saw where the mullahs were leading the country. On the night of November 22nd, 1998, agents from a government intelligence service ransacked this office, then turned this chair to face Mecca, sat the politician down, and stabbed him to death. Then they went upstairs and murdered his wife. Their funerals turned into a massive pro-democracy demonstration. Murders like this, estimated to be in the hundreds during the past decade, sent a chilling message to reformers. The mullahs have long memories. And it came through loud and clear to the Forahar's son and daughter, Arash and Parastu, who were already living as exiles in Germany.
It was a message for all the ones who were
spoken against the brutality, spoken against Islamic regime, that we have no limit.
The tomb of the Ayatollah Khomeini. It stands in conspicuous contrast to the austere piety of his life, more representative, critics say, of the extravagance of those who succeeded him. After he died in 1989, Iran's President Ali Khamenei replaced him as the supreme leader, while the speaker in the parliament, the cleric Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, became the president. Below them, a hierarchy of clerics had taken control of entire sectors of the national economy, mostly through foundations that are managed as private fiefdoms without public oversight.
According to some estimations, nearly 35% of GNP of Iran belongs to the foundations. They are not clear. They don't give any accounts to the people. They don't let any auditing. They don't pay any penny of taxes. They are not under control of the parliament.
And nobody knows where it goes?
No, nobody knows. But nobody has the account because nobody are allowed to go for auditing.
I'm of 100% Sicilian descent, so I think the best way to explain it, it's like little mafia families. They each have control over certain sectors. So just like, you know, in New Jersey, you might have one family that controls the port. Well, you might have one clerical family that controls the port. The Foundation of the Oppressed, which has everything from the monopoly on Coca-Cola to chicken parts to, shipping licenses.
The powerful cleric and former president Rafsanjani is reputedly one of the wealthiest men in Iran. His family-based business empire girds the world. It deals in an almost incalculable array of products, from oil and gas to baby food. The homes of influential clerics in Iran's capital, rarely seen by outsiders. Even photography is dangerous in this neighborhood, for these are conspicuous reminders that, once again, a wealthy elite has hijacked the national economy. The Shah of Iran had powerful political friends in the United States and other Western democracies because he was seen as a stabilizing element in a volatile region. He didn't even try to conceal his corruption or his ostentatious wealth. He protected his throne with formidable security, including a terrifying intelligence service called Savak. And even when he briefly lost power in 1953, American and British agents helped overthrow a democratic government and restored him to his throne. It was during the Cold War. Washington was worried that leftist politicians were pro-communist. The British were worried about oil. The answer, a pro-Western dictator. The Shah's military machine became the fourth largest in the world. By the 70s, half the military hardware exported from the United States ended up in Iran.
I have only two arms. But the strength comes because what I represent to my people, if they like it or not.
But by 1979, he'd lost touch with his people again, and they rose up once again and drove him out of the country for good. Under the Ayatollah Khomeini, there would be no turning back. It was time for a settling of old scores.
The notion of the United States as the great Satan started with Ayatollah Khomeini because one of the pillars of the revolution was against the United States. And it was based on the historical reality that the United States in 1953 had overthrown the government in Iran and reinstated the monarchy, reinstated the Shah.
Iran has a long history of grief inflicted by invaders. They are non-Arabs in the middle of the Arab world, an austere minority within Islam called Shiites. This is the martyrs section of Iran's largest cemetery, Behesht-e Zahra, Most of the dead buried here were killed in an 8-year war with Iraq during the 80s, a war that cost Iran 300,000 lives. The Islamic Republic wasn't quite a year old. In 1980, Saddam Hussein, worried that it might inspire a Shiite uprising in Iraq, struck hard, armed with American support. James Woolsey, a former director of the CIA, says it shouldn't be surprising that America supported Iraq.
What happened, of course, back in the 80s was as a result of the Iranian hostage-taking, which was taken very personally by all Americans. The hatred for the Iranian government in this country was very, very strong. And well into the Iran-Iraq war, the United States did provide some assistance, intelligence mainly, to Saddam Hussein. In retrospect, I think that was a bad decision.
June 1982, Lebanon became the stage for another confrontation. Israel invaded to stop attacks on its northern communities by Muslim militia groups. Iran intervened to help the Shiite minority there.
They simply do not believe that Israel invaded Lebanon without a green light from Washington.
Robert Baer, a former CIA agent, arrived in Lebanon in time to witness the beginning of a tragic spiral in misunderstanding and violence. He's the author of the book, See No Evil.
A seminal event had occurred about 6 months before I got there, and that was the kidnapping of 3 Iranian diplomats. They were murdered, and they were buried in the Lebanese forces parking lot in the part of Beirut. What we didn't realize as Americans, because we didn't understand Iran, is that we were going to get blamed for that kidnapping. The way it went down is the Iranians assumed, since the Lebanese Christian forces were our allies and the allies of Israel, that we had to be responsible for those kidnappings. So you have these 2 events, and Iran says, all right, we're at war. Undeclared war, but nonetheless we're at war.
Israel, the enemy, and perceived by Iran as a proxy for the United States, would soon face a powerful new opponent. Out of the rubble of Lebanon would emerge a new Shiite movement, Hezbollah, inspired and funded by Iran's hardline clerics, soon deployed against American targets. April 1983, the American embassy in Beirut bombed, 63 dead. October 1983, U.S. Marines in Lebanon as peacekeepers attacked by a suicide bomber, 243 dead.
We were peacekeepers in Lebanon. They don't look at it that way. Or as Americans, we say you can't kidnap innocent people, journalists, priests, people like that. It's wrong. They look at it differently. It's a war of civilizations for them. And it was very successful, frankly, and cheap.
It worked in Lebanon, and in the year 2000, Israel finally withdrew. The Lebanese civil war was over. Hezbollah in Lebanon had become a political party, but its fundamental militancy would continue, and tactics employed in Lebanon would become a template for armed resistance throughout the region.
This is the way you fight a war. This is how you defeat F-16s. This is how you defeat aircraft carriers. We beat the United States, we beat the Israelis in Lebanon, and we're going to beat them in Palestine.
In Palestine, the war of civilizations became a war on civilians. Now Israel confronts the enemy on its own doorstep. The battlefront is now in Israel and the occupied territories, the cities and towns of the West Bank. In January, when Israel intercepted a shipload of sophisticated weapons bound for Palestine from Iran, they called it support for terrorism. To Iran, this is a freedom struggle. Dr. Sayed Mohammed Ali Mousavi, one of 2 Iranian diplomats in North America, is Iran's ambassador to Canada and the only government official we approached who would discuss terrorism. How do you justify the continuing support for organizations that have their fingerprints on acts of violence against civilians?
Like?
Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
We never have supported any groups which take act of terrorism. We have morally supported groups whom are fighting for their independence or for their being out of occupations.
More than morally?
No.
Hundreds of millions of dollars?
No. Give us evidence.
It is widely reported that, that Hezbollah, up until recently, was supplied by $100 million a year from Iran, that the Revolutionary Guards were running training camps for Hezbollah fighters and Hamas fighters,
No.
and with training. And that's false?
No. Yes, we deny that. Our support to Hezbollah has been a moral support. We continue to do that because in our belief, a fight against occupation is not a terrorist fight. It is a legitimate fight. It is not terrorism.
It's a distinction that has been challenged legally in the United States before a federal court in a case involving a family who lives here in West Orange, New Jersey, and a deadly bus ride in Israel 7 years ago. Stephen Flato, a real estate lawyer, used this video as evidence in a landmark court case on terrorism. It involved his daughter, Alisa, who was studying Judaism in a seminary in Jerusalem.
A few days before Passover in 1995, she decided she would take a vacation with 2 other girls and get a suntan and do a little swimming.
Alisa Flato and her friend boarded a bus like this one on the morning of April 19th, along with a group of Israeli soldiers.
There was one bus earlier. That's it. There's, I think, 2 buses a day, and we were on the second. Alisa and I sat next to each other. We sat in the seats directly behind the driver. She sat on the left side, I sat on the right side. And I think we were sort of snoozing.
Suddenly, a car pulled alongside. It was a suicide bombing. A group called Palestinian Islamic Jihad would claim responsibility.
What I recall was that there was a man trying to get a plastic tube down her throat, and he couldn't get it to go down.
Paramedics worked to save her. 7 of the soldiers were killed. 3 days later, Alisa died. She was 20 years old. Her father suspected that the blame extended far beyond the terrorist who did this.
We had a meeting with the State Department in 1996, and there were about 20 of us in the room, and they confirmed to us that Iran provides the funding to Islamic Jihad.
Alisa Flato would become the silent plaintiff in a major court case. An aggressive counterterrorism law approved in 1996 let her father sue Iran. A judge awarded Flato $225 million.
$225 million in punitive damages, in his words, designed to put the Iranians out of the terrorism business.
But Washington would become reluctant to enforce the full judgment. The complex relationship with Iran was changing, even as America mourned the victims of another terrorist attack, even as President Clinton sounded unequivocal.
Anyone who attacks one American attacks every American, and we protect and defend our own.
The attack was in Saudi Arabia. 19 American servicemen died when a fuel truck loaded with explosives blew up outside a military residence called Khobar Towers. Investigators soon had a prime suspect, a Saudi offshoot of Hezbollah.
We know Iran was involved. We know Iran trained gave alias passports, helped provide surveillance of American facilities in Saudi Arabia, and that Khamenei gave a fatwa to blow up Khobar.
One of the victims was Mike Heiser, 35, from Florida. His mother, Fran Heiser, took President Clinton's assurances to heart. She expected someone to be held accountable. Today, she's still reliving June 25th, 1996.
There was such a blur in a day when, you know, something like that happens. And Mike was our only child, and we kind of walked around in a zombie state for a long time.
The Heiser family were initially reassured because the investigation was being handled personally by the then director of the FBI, Louis Freeh.
Every time he told us the same thing, that he was committed to seeing justice done, that he would stay with the case, would work the case, the FBI will stay with it, and he wants it solved, and then he would say, I'm not a politician, I'm a policeman.
But America's top policeman would retire in 2001, his most frustrating case unresolved, not for a lack of evidence, but for a lack of political will.
Saudi Arabia didn't want to look too closely into it because at that point there was a reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And they certainly didn't want to indict Iran. It was another terrorism attack that was passed over, that was overlooked, because we didn't want to do anything against Iran.
For President Clinton, the Khobar bombing would become a painful passage. He'd actually once met the victim, Mike Heiser, a 17-year veteran of the Air Force.
What is this one?
But justice for the Heiser family would have to take a back seat to the imperatives of international politics. What the Heisers didn't know was that the assurances of the FBI and the President of the United States were all overshadowed by dramatic political events inside the country they held responsible for the tragedy in their family, Iran. In 1997, the people of Iran sent a strong message to the world that they were weary of their hardline religious government, that maybe it was time for a new revolution. This time through the ballot box. On May 23rd, they elected a new president, a dark horse political reformer named Mohammad Khatami.
What happened in 1997 is that the Iranian people went to the polls in record numbers to elect a guy who wasn't supposed to become president. He was defeated by a little-known cleric who happened to have something called authenticity and charm. Mohammad Khatami had run the National Library. It would be as if the Librarian of Congress decided to run for president. It sounds sort of trite or superficial, but he's as charming as Bill Clinton.
Previous administrations had tried to improve relations with Iran, but in Khatami, the Clinton White House saw new potential for engagement.
We must be willing to deal directly with each other as two proud and independent nations and address on a mutual basis the issues that have been keeping us apart.
The language was cautious because there were serious issues underlying the animosity that had bedeviled relations with Iran since the Islamic Revolution of 1979.
The problem of Iranian support for terrorist organizations, the problem of Iranian opposition to the Middle East peace process, and certainly to a peace process with Israel, and a deep sense of concern on the part of the United States about nuclear proliferation or weapons of mass destruction proliferation in Iran. Those are important problems, and those problems don't get solved by continued division. They don't get solved by not talking.
But talking to Iran has never been easy for Westerners, especially Americans. Elaine Scialino has followed decades of false starts in U.S.-Iranian relations.
I like to call Iran the Bermuda Triangle of American foreign policy because Iran helped get Jimmy Carter defeated. Ronald Reagan had to deal with American hostages held in Lebanon by Iranian-supported groups. Actually, the one who did the best on Iran was Reagan's successor, George Bush the father, because he came into office and in his first inaugural speech announced that goodwill begets goodwill when it came to Iran. He really was searching for an opening to find some sort of areas of cooperation and maybe rapprochement.
The United States has tried covert and back-channel communications with Iran off and on for the last decade and a half anyway. None of them has ever come to anything positive because the mullahs always stop it. The reason the mullahs always stop it is they need us as an enemy. They need us as an enemy in order to keep a rationale for repressing the Iranian people. And otherwise, they're not in power anymore.
This is one of the sources of the mullahs' power. The holy city of Qom, one of Iran's most important centers of Islamic learning. The mullahs' political influence has always been an extension of their spiritual authority. The Islamic Republic transformed that authority into near dictatorial power, first for Ayatollah Khomeini, now his successor.
Ayatollah Khamenei's power is vested in a concept known as velayat-e faqih. It's hard to translate, but probably the rule of the Islamic jurist. And it stems from the notion that there should be one arbiter of all Islamic law and of government. And indeed, in Ayatollah Khomeini's early writings, he did talk about this notion and this idea that there shouldn't be democracy. There has to be a single arbiter.
But even in Qom, there are reform voices. Yusuf Sana'i is one of only 10 grand ayatollahs in Iran. They're the country's most influential religious thinkers. His lectures at the seminary always draw large crowds. In recent years, he's shocked his followers by taking pro-democracy positions on controversial issues. We wanted to ask him about the most controversial issue of them all.
To a Westerner, the institution of Supreme Leader, velayat-e faqih, suggests a principle of infallibility, as the Pope.
His immediate reaction was revealing. Tell the interviewer that the question is too political, and I'm too clever to answer it.
I can see that very clearly.
There's a reason for caution across the street, a house so sensitive we had to secretly photograph it. The Grand Ayatollah Montazeri has been under house arrest for the past 5 years for offending the Supreme Leader. Despite the risk, Sana'i tries to address one of the most sensitive issues in Iran, claiming that Iran's constitution and Islamic law should make all voters and their votes equal. He says Imam Khomeini was not infallible, let alone anyone else. In an Islamic system, everyone has one vote, from the supreme leader to the president and all the other authorities. The supreme leader has only one vote, and he should not be able to impose his ideas on anyone else. He is not infallible. He is capable of making mistakes, just like everyone else. To err is human. That's the theory, but in practice, democracy calls for political toughness, a quality the popular President Khatami seems to lack.
Despite the fact that he's a charming politician, he's not a guerrilla infighter. He doesn't have the stomach for backroom politics. Instead, he has an alliance with the man who has even more power than he, Ayatollah Khamenei.
With political power biased toward hardline conservative clerics, Iranians are tired of religious politics and a political religion. 2 of every 3 Iranians are under the age of 25, but you'd never know it here. Friday prayers are increasingly attracting the 1/3 of the population who can remember the Islamic Revolution. In the mountains overlooking Tehran, high school students flee the pollution of the city and the eyes of the clerics who forbid even the most innocent intimacies between the sexes. Even holding hands is forbidden for the unmarried. But on the mountainside, they are like teenagers everywhere, still full of energy and humor and curiosity about the wider world. The dream of many is to get away.
Are you going to go to university?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
You have any trouble getting in?
Mathematics.
Mathematics?
Yes.
You're going to become engineers. Are you going to stay in Iran?
No.
You're going to the USA?
Iran is oil-rich, but the economy, mismanaged by a corrupt elite, offers few incentives for the young to stay here.
How we can find job for them? We need money, investment. How we can collect the money? Outside of the country, they don't come here because of the security. Inside of the country, the money and the wealth and the capital is in the hand of minority, and they don't want to give it up.
This could be a preview of what lies ahead. July 1999, a student protest turned into a demonstration for secular democracy. Young people are losing patience with a reform process that seems almost to be stalled. Out of the violence, one image caught the public imagination more than any other. The student, Ahmed Batabi, holding aloft the bloody T-shirt of a friend who'd been injured by the police. Batabi made the cover of the British news magazine The Economist and got a 15-year jail sentence for his moment of fame. Just 5 years ago, the family of the missing Siamak Pourzand saw the election of a reform government as the start of a move toward a more open and modern system. So far, there isn't much to show for it. Pourzand's daughter, Azadeh, who turned 16 and became a voter last year, had high hopes.
Dear Mr. President, I am a 17-year-old Iranian.
From her home in Washington, she has written to President Khatami to ask for help in finding her father, even though she knows the police and intelligence services are under the control of Iran's religious leaders.
I just voted to Khatami, to Mr. Khatami, and just like a voter, now I demand all of my rights from him, because he promised me in his slogans to do some things, but none of them is accurate.
And what, did you get an answer? What did the president say?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing.
No answer?
No answer.
At the end of last year, the first major war of the new millennium, a war on terrorism. As U.S. forces landed in Afghanistan, there was cautious but unqualified support from one surprising quarter. Iran offered the U.S. safe passage for humanitarian aid and even sanctuary for U.S. servicemen if they needed it.
How important an opening was this?
Well, I considered it an important step forward. In the world of no progress, any millimeter ahead tends to look like a mile. So in the comparative terms of the past, it was, I think, something that we welcomed. Secretary Powell was able to shake the hand of Foreign Minister Kharazi, which was a forward step beyond what Secretary Albright was able to do in her time. So there are all senses that that was moving forward.
Senator Joe Biden, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, feels there are strong strategic reasons for improved relations with Iran.
One of the reasons why I think it would be beneficial for us to try to move beyond the old wounds and do what we can, even if it's indirect, to be agents of promoting democratic institutions and instincts in Iran, even if, once they're a democratic nation, God willing, they still don't like us. I'd rather deal with a democratic nation. I mean, look, the French aren't crazy about us half the time. I'm not looking for an Iran that says, God bless America. I'm looking for an Iran that doesn't support terror. I'm looking for an Iran who sees the mutuality of interest that we have relative to Iraq and other places.
But for years, the challenge has been to get past the hardline elements who rule Iran to engage the pro-democracy reformers who want normal relations with the West. It was a problem that surfaced again as the Bush administration prepared this year's State of the Union speech.
A State of the Union is like a moon launch. It is a vast undertaking for the whole White House and even the whole executive branch.
David Frum, then on the White House staff, worked on the president's speech.
It is deeply considered. It is read again and again. Dozens of eyes go over it, question it, challenge it.
It became clear as the speech evolved that it would have to deal with terrorism, and it would have to be consistent with the doctrine that the president defined last fall, that the nation was at war against terrorism and would henceforth know its friends by the quality of their support in that war.
The Bush Doctrine on terrorism is a serious proposition. It is going to define his presidency. It governs his conduct. And all governments in the world should know that and should act accordingly.
Once George Bush got up and said, you're either with us or you're against us, the question was then, well, where do all these different countries fit in? And despite the efforts of Colin Powell, the Secretary of State, and some in his team to try to woo Iran and entice Iran, seduce Iran to become part of the with us, it was impossible.
We will shut down terrorist. As the president rehearsed the final drafts, it was clear that relations with Iran will be defined, as have been relations with Iraq and North Korea, by outstanding grievances. America's concern about the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and terrorism.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world by seeking weapons of mass destruction.
The speech to Congress raised a crucial question. Has Iran become a potential target for military action? A question we wanted to ask, but administration officials declined our requests for an interview. Even the speechwriter David Frum, widely believed to have inspired the famous phrase, axis of evil, was at a loss for words.
What is the or else? Obviously there is an or else factor. What do you think it is?
I think it's the universal rule of the American government that it does not make threats. It does not spell out to people what will happen if they continue. It doesn't. I think it is a rule of it spells out doctrines. It spells out limits, and then if people defy those limits, then there are consequences. I don't know that there is some plan in a drawer of a what else.
Well, putting Iran in the axis of evil is sort of a feel-good one-day event. And the United States, President Bush makes clear to the American people, Iran is our enemy. Then what? How do you then put that phrase into effect? Do you bomb Iran? Do you take out a military installation that you think may be the source of weapons that are going to Hezbollah in Lebanon? You know, what comes next?
The nearest thing to a clue came soon after the speech during a private conversation involving the president's security advisor, Condoleezza Rice, and the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, who has been advocating closer ties with Iran's moderate politicians.
Within a matter of 2 weeks, there was, I won't call it backpedaling because that's pejorative, but I think there was a refinement of what they meant by it. I made a speech not too long ago, but in this interim period, where I laid out some specific proposals and invited members of the Majlis, the elected representatives in Iran, to meet with us, members of the United States Congress.
I'm intrigued by the response to those suggestions you've got from the administration. I have to ask, do you think the administration wants to move in that direction?
I'm positive they do. And the reason I'm positive is not conjecture. I met with the administration and with Dr. Rice, the National Security Advisor. They would like to move in that direction.
That might be more difficult now, at least in the short term. Axis of evil quickly reminded Iranian nationalists like the former president Rafsanjani of old grudges. At Friday prayers in Tehran, February the 8th, just before the 23rd anniversary of the revolution, a crowd of 5,000 cheered him as he denounced American policy. The axis of evil speech may inadvertently have backfired against Iran's reformers.
The American intervention is not in favor of the freedom lovers, in favor of the people, in favor of the poor people, but in favor of the government, particularly extremist right.
The anti-American slogans are usually choreographed, but this year they seemed a little more spontaneous. When he spoke here in the past, President Khatami chided the crowd for shouting, "Death to America." But not this year. Each evening in the holy city of Qom, the Grand Ayatollah Sana'i holds court after prayers to discuss religion and politics. He found widespread shock and disappointment over the axis of evil comment. He says that if supporters of democracy in Iran had been under pressure before, they will be even under more pressure in the future. And if they haven't been under pressure, they will be, and Mr. Bush has caused this situation and is responsible for it. In Washington, one of Iran's most prominent reformers, whose husband has been missing since last fall, finally hears from him on her answering machine. He confirms her worst fears.
Yeah, I came home and Azadeh told me, Mimi, I have talked about something that is not good. And when I heard his voice, I was going to die.
He told her, clearly under duress, to stop talking about him. Days later, a newspaper reporter in Tehran revealed that Siamak Pourzand has been charged with treason. Marenga's car has since spoken to her husband and told him she will not be silenced. She will continue speaking out, no matter what the cost.
I wished if they killed me and Siamak, like Dariush Furuhar and Parvani Furuhar and others, it was better than this.
For Azadeh Pourzand and her mother, America is now a place of exile as she waits for news about her father's fate, which seems to parallel the fate of Iran's struggling democratic movement. A movement overshadowed by the power of Iran's religious leaders and by a new sense of isolation from the outside world.
This report continues on our website, where you'll find an overview of U.S.-Iranian relations since September 11th and Iran's ties to terrorism. A closer look at politics inside Iran and the prospects for reform. Read an analysis of Iran's alleged pursuit of nuclear weapons. Frontline's extended interviews, background readings, and more. And find out on our website if this program is re-airing on your PBS station and when. Then join the discussion at pbsonline.pbs.org, or write an email to frontline@pbs.org, or write to this address.
Next time on Frontline, this is the face of Islam, but so is this, and this. Muslims make up 1/5 of the world's population, but to many Americans, they are a mystery. Frontline journeys to the Middle East, to Europe, Asia, Africa, and America to unveil this global culture and tell the stories of Muslims.
To order Frontline's Terror and Tehran on video cassette, call PBS Home Video at 1-800-PLAY-PBS.
National corporate funding for Frontline is provided by NPR.
In Denver.
Skopje.
In Tehran.
Omaha.
In Istanbul.
In Hong Kong. Belgrade.
In Decatur.
In Seattle.
Beijing.
In Pittsburgh.
In Johannesburg. This is NPR News.
And by Earthlink. Frontline is made possible by the annual financial support of PBS viewers like you. Thank you.
This is PBS.
Local presentation of Frontline on KTEH is made possible by the Silicon Valley San Jose Business Journal, providing in-depth reporting of business news in San Jose and the Silicon Valley, and by the members of KTEH.
In today's ever-changing world, there's one news service that will always keep you better informed. BBC World.
It was unbelievable how catastrophic it was.
A deadly inferno.
The whole country was on fire.
A war with nature.
We have behind us here a potential Holocaust.
The fire crossed the ridge there.
They wanted to push the envelope. It was a gamble, and they lost. This summer, I think, is a warning.
Fire wars. Next time on Nova.
They say that England and America are two countries divided by a common language.
But we're united by a common love of antiques.
I haven't seen a Mickey McMouse dressed in his tartan.
Watch Antiques Roadshow UK as we search Great Britain for hidden treasures. For a fascinating look at the British Isles through its antiques and heirlooms,
it's Antiques Roadshow UK.
Spend the evening eavesdropping on the day-to-day lives of the EastEnders. It's a look at London's working class through the lives of the people living in imaginary Albert Square. Don't miss EastEnders, only on KTEH.
Can I ask you a question? A surgeon operates on a child and gives the parents a certain chance of success, say 80%. When he knows his real success rate is only 20%. The parents agree, sign the form, the operation goes ahead, and that child dies. A lot of us who've lost kids have been asking, isn't there a case of calling that murder?
How do nothing now?
It rains on his arrival.
I'm starting a new job.
Is that so?
At St. Joseph's. I'm the new priest.
In a new town.
It's beautiful.
With new people.
Have you ever had a girlfriend?
Come again? What have you got against the 20th century?
Mother of God, a hippie priest.
Where am I, Assumpta? The Twilight Zone?
Ah, Father. Welcome to Bellicus Angel.
Local presentation of the News Hour with Jim Lair on KTEH is made possible by the Silicon Valley San Jose Business